Welcome to Talent Show, the podcast where we put personality front and center in the hiring process. I'm your host, Lauren Glass Mullins, founder of Personality Pool, and around here, we believe people are more than bullet points on a resume. So whether you are hiring for a team or trying to join one, we've got tips, stories, and a whole lot of personality to help you stand out. Let's dive in. Quincy,
Lauren.
you are my first podcast guest. I'm so excited that you're letting me interview you.
I'm so happy to be here with you. I appreciate it.
Well, you have seriously become like one of my go-to mentor, advisor. You're just, you know, all the things about hiring and beyond. So I love that. And I couldn't think of a better person to talk to first. But before we get started, I want you to introduce yourself to our soon-to-be listeners.
I'm happy to. So I am Quincy Valencia, as the name says here. I have been in this talent space in one form or another since the 90s because I'm older than dirt. And I've moved from, back when in the 90s, applicant tracking systems were new and novel, all the way up to where we are now with the advancement of AI. And it's a relatively short amount of time for that advancement, but I've gotten to live on all sides of that, from being a provider and a practitioner and of course a candidate, and seen the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I'm excited to be here to talk to you about it today.
Well, thank you. I know that you'll have a lot of things, that we can discuss. So, okay, I do want to start off with you telling me, if you have one. If you don't, it's okay. But I would love for you to tell us like your craziest hiring story, whether it's something that happened to you, like a weird question you were asked, or like a weird process, or something that you've seen, just like your craziest hiring
Yeah. So
experience.
this one, there are crazier stories than this, but this one has stuck with me since it happened. And it was the early 2000s when it happened. And I was a recruiter for a retailer in their corporate office. And it was a big retailer. You would know it if I said it. And we were interviewing, and one of my peers was the IT recruiter. I did mostly accounting and finance back then, but our boss was out on maternity leave. So I was like acting manager or whatever while she was out. And the way it worked there is, the candidates would come in, the coordinators would greet them, you'd take them to your bank of interview rooms, the recruiter would come in, and then, especially when it was a higher level candidate, you had scheduled a day for them, right? So
Okay.
we had a candidate coming in, he was like a director of IT role or something. And the coordinator went in, and then the recruiter went in and then came over to me and said, Quincy, I don't know what to do. And I go, what do you mean? What are you talking about? And it was like, I need you to interview this candidate. And I go, what? I just need you to interview this. Just go in, say you're the manager, and just ask some questions. And I go, all right. So I went in and I did, and I met the candidate and I looked at their resume, and it was a good candidate. And I asked a few questions, and because it was spur of the moment, I didn't even know why I was there. And I talked, and I was like, all right, great. Well, it's time, your next interviewer's coming. It's really good to meet you. And I was puzzled. I had no idea why I was in there. And I was like, we'll see you later. And he stood up to shake my hand. And this man was wearing a full suit, jacket, coat, tie, the whole thing. It was appropriate, tucked into sweatpants, joggers. I'm talking like elastic banded at the ankle, tucked in joggers, and then dress shoes.
No.
Had not mentioned it, had not said anything, whatever. I'm like, this is why they wanted me to interview. I go back to the recruiter and I go, what is going on? And like, I don't know. Did we fly this candidate in and they lost their luggage? Which I'm thinking you would mention that. Or they
You
were
would
going
bring
to
that up.
Walmart really quick or something in the morning. They were open 24 hours. Nothing. No, it was a local candidate. It was the whole thing, whatever. It's like, what do we do? Well, they were there. We had to send them through the rest of the process. And they went through that whole day. As a director of IT, went through the whole day, never brought it off, never mentioned it. We gave a heads up to the people coming in, whatever. And it was like, he was a good candidate on paper. He was so good and he interviewed well, but what was that about? And this man went through the entire interview all day, didn't mention it, did nothing, whatever, and didn't get the offer because it was bizarre. Stress
It's like,
since then.
okay, so when I was preparing for this, I asked Chat GPT, like, I don't know, I can't remember exactly what I typed in, but I was like, what are questions like I could ask? Or like I said, what would be like a rapid fire thing? Like, would you hire this person if they showed up in the interview this way? Would you not?
Right.
And one of the things said something about like they show up in, some outfit like you
Yeah.
described. And I was like, nobody does that. And I nixed it. I was like, that's so dumb. Like nobody's gonna show up that
Yeah.
way.
Yeah. Gray joggers, gray tie at the waist, elastic waistband, elastic around the ankle joggers, dress shoes.
Not even like Lululemon, like looking like
No.
black pants, like full on.
Uh-uh.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, it
And
just goes to show this is why you interview people.
it is why you interview people. If you're, I mean, yeah, this guy was like,
What did it show? I mean, he was a great candidate otherwise, so an argument could be made. It showed strange decision making. Like you would, if we had
yeah,
flown,
it really did.
even if we had flown the candidate in and his clothes weren't there, like seriously, Walmart's open 24 hours. It was at the time. He could have, there was no Uber either, but he could have grabbed a cab and gone
Right.
there. Or he could have mentioned it. I am so sorry that this happened. And he could have not tucked it in. That was a bizarre thing to do. I mean, there were so many other ways to handle that. And then
Just
to not
address it.
address it, right? And there was none. And so ultimately, the decision makers in the process were like, no, that wasn't handled the way it should have been handled. And they decided not to hire him.
Well, I
That's
think
there's
obviously that's hilarious, but like you said, like I think a lot of us when we're going through the interview process, whether
Mhm.
we're a candidate or even a hiring manager, you don't realize all the non-verbal things that actually go into deciding if somebody would be a good fit, or just like you said, that exhibited like if something did happen, he wasn't open enough to address it, or he didn't like use his critical thinking to find a solution.
right.
It says a lot about somebody, and obviously their resume was great, but at the end of the day, there's a lot of great resumes, but you've got to find the right person.
That's exactly true.
Well, lucky for everybody out there.
I know.
Personality pool exists. Okay, so I want to ask you some questions. I think there's so much, like with the human resources process and the hiring process, while we live in it every day and there's like tons of innovation and things that happen, it does tend to be still like a pretty old school thought process when you are like really looking at how people like go about things when they are making hiring decisions. And of course, there's lots of tech that's changing things. But overall, as somebody who's trying to sell it to these people, I do see like there's still a huge learning curve here, and there's some things we need to let go of. So, my first question for you would be, what is one outdated hiring practice that you think needs to just go away? And if you have more than one, that's great too.
There's a lot of tech, and people are applying tech, and everybody's saying, how can we add some AI to this stuff and make it better or easier? And I will say that the biggest mistake that I make that's been around since the advent of the ATS is to try and tech your way out of a bad process. You can't do that. There are processes in place that are antiquated and outdated, and we make candidates go through 17 rounds of interviews, and we take too long to get back with them for no reason. And we dismiss them from the process because we don't like the format of their resume. And they're just, we, ignore internal talent in favor of external for no reason whatsoever because we don't, there's just so many things that are outdated as far as our thinking that we don't think we can change because it's the sacred cow in a process. But if we add tech to it, by God, it will fix. And all you're doing is adding tech to it and it doesn't work. So that's the sort of the big picture. I think, I mentioned the one, please don't make people go through unnecessary parts of a process. You're going to lose the candidate. You're going to turn the candidate off, and you're not necessarily adding value. It's one thing to have people, interview with several people. That's
Mhm.
to benefit not just the organization and making the right decision, but also the candidate. They need to understand what the culture and feel and environment is, what the view of the role is, and how it will work with others. I think that's actually a really good practice. But can we do it all at once? Can we, or do it, maybe an initial interview, and then, if there are three people who are equally going to input into the process, do it all at the same day, make it a better, more efficient process, and then please make sure you're getting back to the candidate in a timely manner. That's my biggest pet peeve, I think, in the process.
Yeah.
But
I
there's
think that's huge too because it's like that's a thing that I'm always scouring the internet for what is it that candidates hate about the hiring process. And it's more likely that people are saying it was not an enjoyable process. And the ones that do like have an interesting hiring process that is like very candidate focused rather than like systems focused, people do sing those praises when it happens because it's so rare. And I think there is constantly like the whole ghosting candidates. It's almost like you feel as if, from a candidate's perspective, that you are an inconvenience or doing the company a favor by applying for their job rather
right.
than the company being like, I'm so excited that out of all the jobs that this person could have picked, they chose to apply here. And I don't know if you like in your mindset, do you think that sort of that's a problem that most hiring, not all, but a lot of hiring professionals like kind of do look at it that way.
It's a double-sided sell. The job of a recruiter is very, very hard. It is a sales job at its core because you have to sell a candidate on the company just as much as you're selling the company on the candidate. And you have to make sure there's a good fit. And so if you're asking questions from the corporate side, from the organization side, I'm in favor of asking tough questions. I'm not in favor of asking tough questions for the sake of asking a tough question. That doesn't make sense to me. But you want to make sure that that candidate understands, you need to make sure that they have the level of critical thinking. They can think on their feet. They can whatever. The truth is that a lot of times when I'm asking these questions, I don't really care what their answer is. I want to make sure, I don't even care if they made it up a lot of times. I want to know that if I have them in front of a client, if that's appropriate, that they can think on their feet, that they can actually answer the question that I asked them, that they can tell me why it's important from a business standpoint. Those are tough, but they're relevant. If you're asking that Google question, the famous Google question everybody knows is out there, or the if you were a tree, what kind of tree we could be, what value are you getting there? And if I'm a candidate, it's just irritating me. So let's make sure that we understand it's a dual process. It's just important for the candidate to have a good experience. And you as an employer are setting the tone for that candidate, which in turn sets the tone for how it will be when you work there, which in turn sets the tone for, are you going to give your best self when you're there? Or are you going to phone it in until you can find something else? And I do think by making the process more candidate friendly, like you said, you're getting a more authentic view of the candidate than you would if you're only asking those questions that are, make sure it's a smart response and make sure all these, it's important. I get that. But those can be rehearsed, especially if you're further along in your career, especially now with AI and ChatGPT. What are they likely to ask me about based on
Yes.
this job description and based on my background? I mean, you can rehearse those things and practice those things, and that's good. You should practice and be prepared. But are you getting an authentic view of that candidate and how they'll be when they come and work at your organization? I don't think so. And by putting 10 more people in the process, what more are you getting? I
Right.
don't know the answer.
And then it's just such a time suck too for both sides. Like, even, yes, like the candidate is having to go through all this rigorous screening, but you have to do that. Like, you have to execute all of that. And I'm always puzzled by that. I'm like, who wants to do that? Like, at some point, what is it? Like, how long does it take you to make a first impression of somebody? Um,
Right.
and I just think that's like such an underused thing in the hiring process. Like, you need to have thoughtful questions and it needs to be a process to show buy-in and, get the information that you're trying to see. But ultimately, if it's taking you 7 rounds of unnecessary, complicated questions that can be rehearsed,
Agree. Because I will say that oftentimes that goes on as well because you're looking at their resume and going, God, they check all the boxes. But the first four people that talked to him went, I don't know. And if you don't know by the fourth person, then they're not right. It's not that hard to figure out. So there's a lot. I still think, resume or job history is important for a lot of jobs. You can't just say, I'm going to hire this person to be a product manager if they, worked in
if they've never
whatever.
managed a product.
Right. Or never have any sort of relevant skill if they're fresh out of school or whatever. So that it's important, but I think there's more to it than that. There are organizational fit and not fit. I'm not going to be comfortable in an organization that is too buttoned up. There has to be some sort of ability to think outside the box and innovate and have that crazy idea that people could look at you and go, that's the stupidest thing I ever heard. You can go, you're probably right, and move on. And it's not looked at as negative, right? That's the way that I vibe, and that's the way that people will get the most out of me and that I'll be able to contribute the most to an organization. And not every organization is okay with that. And not every organization builds that way. And that's fine. There are other places, but there's more. You will never know that from my resume
Yeah.
necessarily. So there's a place for it. You have to have it, but there's also more of what sort of environment do you thrive in? Who do you like to work with? What is your communication style?
Hmm.
Can I put you in front of a client? I can have the best resume in the world, but if you can't sit me in front of a client and it's a client-facing role, I'm not going to be the right one. So it's the same to me for requiring a degree for positions that don't really need a degree. That makes me insane. That's a huge pet peeve. We should get rid of that. You'd learn some things. If you're going to be an accountant, you should have an accounting degree. If
Totally.
you're going to be in sales, I don't care if you have a degree or not. I want to know what your creative thinking process is. I want to know how you answer some of those tough questions that I talked about before. I want to know what your presence is. Do you make
Yes.
me feel comfortable? Do you make me feel uncomfortable? Are you asking me probing questions, or is it just you talking the whole time? You will never know that from a degree, and you will never know that from a resume.
No, I love that. And that's two big pain points that I want to like push into a bit. So let's start with the degree situation because with personality pool, I'm dealing a ton with entry level or
Hmm.
frontline customer service workers, hospitality, healthcare, whatever, several verticals, but the people that are going to be dealing with your clients or customers, whatever. And yeah, all customer facing type roles. And so I remember when I was trying to get my first sales job out of college, I would apply to all of these jobs and I was kind of trying to get a job while I was still in college. I was
Hmm.
close to finishing. And so I was honest and I would always check like no degree or associate's degree only
Right.
because I technically didn't have my bachelor's degree yet. And I would automatically within like 24 hours get a kickback email saying
Because you
like,
didn't have a degree.
and I know it never even got to a person to review like, okay, let's look at this comprehensively rather than, okay, no degree, goodbye. And I think the world is definitely like making a shift towards realizing that for certain roles, a degree is irrelevant. So what do you think? Yeah, so you're on the side of things of like, unless you're a doctor or something like very highly trained. Yes.
Correct.
But where do you think we can combine this? Where do you think a degree and a resume fits into the process of hiring for these frontline customer service roles?
I don't care if it's a resume or a job history. I think you can look at that. I still think it has a place. It shouldn't be the only deciding factor, but we both, I've worked in companies where if you have 10,000 candidates, 1,000 candidates, there has to be some sort of narrowing.
Yes.
I don't know. Some people are using a degree for that. I think in some places that's a relevant thing to
Hmm.
do, like what I just said. You want to be an accountant? You should probably have an accounting degree. Things that are skilled in that way. So I do think there's some there. I think a degree does in and of itself can show some things. And I'll use a personal story here. When I was in college, I went to a school. It doesn't even matter what I was getting my degree in. I worked my way through college. I tell people, and this is an absolute true story. My senior year of college, I had 5 jobs, 5 at the same time. And I was enrolled full time in university. And so when I was coming out of university and I was interviewing, I went to school because I wanted to be an investment banker. My degree is in international finance and marketing, my undergraduate degree. And so I was interviewing for these roles. And I remember one of them saying to me, you didn't do an internship in finance and I graduated with honors, whatever, but I didn't have the highest GPA and I didn't have,
Yeah,
why should we hire you over somebody else? And I said, because I'm scrappy, because I worked my way through school, because I found a way to make it happen, because I didn't take no for an answer, because I was going to get this done one way or the other, and nobody was going to stop me, whether I have one or another. And you need that in someone in that sort of a role.
totally.
And so to me, that's what sometimes the fact that you get a degree can show that. Not every time, but it
I
can
agree with
show,
that though.
and that's important in some roles, right? And you can show that same thing, though, that same skill level in other ways besides just getting a degree. So looking at that degree by itself is not going to tell you a whole lot. You still have to have that personal interaction. And incidentally, I did get offers from investment banks coming out of college, out of undergrad, and part of that process was going to the firm, like, Citibank was one, Chase was another. And when I was there and I was talking to people who worked in these roles before I'd accepted or declined, they're like, yeah, I'm making $34,000 a year, which was a lot in 1993, or $38,000 a year, but I have to live in New York and I work 90 hours a week and I sleep under my desk with my jacket as a blanket. And I'm like, yeah, I was wrong.
This is not for me.
This is not the right fit, which you wouldn't know from my resume or from my degree.
Totally.
So that was a long sort of interjection, but I have strong feelings about this issue.
No, it's so true too, but like that's what I try to tell. Like I think I you just articulated it so well because I'm like I don't regret getting my degree.
I don't either.
I just think that the overarching hiring process as to which, like, at what points you get screened out for certain things is backwards. And then also, I think we've kind of alluded to this a few times is that it has to be comprehensive. And so you've worked in tech where, video interviewing and all of that has been a part of your world.
Sure.
And that's a part of personality pools world. And I think my conversation that I'm constantly having with people that are trying to do more comprehensive screening and interviewing while also still being like scared of new technologies. I want us to talk a bit about like from your perspective, like in a perfect world, first of all, how important is personality in these particular verticals that we're talking about when we talk about entry level
Mhm.
customer service? And then what in a perfect world do these comprehensive like interview and screening shifts look like for people?
It's funny to me that you mentioned that because, in my estimation, there is no target market where personality is more important than these people who are on the front line. They don't, it's, they may not. It's irrelevant if they've gone to college. It's irrelevant if they have a degree. That has nothing to do with my business as a fast food franchise owner. That has nothing to do with my business as a frontline customer service rep. Call
Yeah,
center, or whatever it is. It has nothing to do with me. What's important to me is how do they articulate themselves? How do they present themselves? There was a woman my husband is a big fan of McDonald's breakfast. Okay, I like it too. It's the best fast food
it's the
breakfast.
best hash brown.
They
The
really
hash
is. They
brown
really.
exclusive. Yeah.
So there was not that far from my house in Myrtle Beach right now, there is a McDonald's location that has a woman who has, since I've lived here for 3 years, has worked the drive-through at the breakfast ship. And I will sometimes go there, even though it's further now from my house than a new one that built, because I love her. I go through her drive-through and she is friendly and she is nice and she's, good morning, baby. How are you doing today? And I hope you have a great day. And thanks for coming to see me. I love your face. She didn't know me, but it makes me want to go back there. What could possibly be more important in that role than her personality? And if she's giving
Totally.
that off, she's getting more customers to come back. It's a better guest experience, which in turn drives revenue. What could be more important than that if you're a frontline worker? And so to me, that's the first thing you want to look for. And sometimes it's not about screening people out. It's about screening them in. People that you would never have considered otherwise for roles ever because
So
of what
good.
their resume says. But there are transferable skills. Just because I've never done X before, I've never worked a cash register before, doesn't mean I can't learn pretty fast. It's not that hard. I use my phone every day for my entire life. Who is going to get my guests to come back? Who is going to make the rest of the team happy? Who's going to give them energy? The lady at the TSA the other day when I was coming back from an overseas trip who was trying to get people through the customs line, and she was going, welcome home, or if you're just coming through, welcome back, and we're happy to see you. Move it forward. We got to hurry. We don't want to spend all day here. I loved her.
That's a
That's
good
what you need in
example.
that role.
It really does. It's like for me, it's always interesting to talk to people about. So we know like personality is a huge indicator of what's going to make a good employee. However, when you ask people, when is the first time in your hiring process that you actually see somebody's personality? I mean,
So how much time do you waste on the front end?
yeah, because you're
So how
not
many people do you screen out that really could be a good fit for you if you just gave them a minute, if you had a conversation with them for 1 second, if they had a chance to present themselves in person instead of on paper?
totally. Yeah, that's the whole thing is like, I think with all of these things, with the outdated processes that we think need to change, ghosting candidates and making it this like very strenuous process, where are you allowing somebody the space to show you a little bit about who they are and why they can do the job? And then you can look at all of those other things later, but like the biggest issue that I see is that there's just like nobody's holding. If you watched Wicked, oh God, I just said holding space, but that whole saga anyways, but it's like nobody's giving the space for people to show their personality.
It's true.
So
100% true. And
no, I
the
think that's huge.
frontline market, again, there's no other place where it's more important than that,
I
unless you're
agree.
doing TED Talks for a living.
Yeah, and who wants to do that? You got to be a crazy person. How do you think hiring will be different 10 years from now?
This is going to be controversial, but I don't really think it will be that much different than it is today.
Honestly, you're so right.
It's not that much different than it was in, the Stone Age in 1995 when Moby Dick was a minnow. It's just, I think that there's a whole lot of fear and speculation. Sometimes it's not fear because if you think it's the right way to go, tech's going to replace every recruiter and nobody will need to talk to anybody and all of these things. And I think that technology is helping us in a lot of ways. It's helping us to understand a candidate as a full person as
Mhm.
opposed to just what you see on a resume or a LinkedIn profile. I think that old school mentality of they haven't done this for 6 years, or they were only at that job for 4 months, whatever it is. I think some of that is going to continue to compress because we know now that those aren't necessarily indicators of
Right.
future success. People have lives. Things change, things happen. So I think those are good, and I think those will continue to go. But fundamentally, it's a people business. So will recruiters be replaced? I don't know. Maybe some people will try it, people will do it. I hope not. Why? Because of all these things we're talking about right now. Because you cannot tell. First of all, recruiting is a difficult job. It's a sales job, and you need people in there. It's just as important for the candidate as it is for the organization. So I think that's really important to see. I think that tech will continue to afford opportunities to see more of the pieces of a candidate that are actually relevant and meaningful and predictors of their future success than just what you see on a resume or what can narrow you from an ATS or from a, whatever it is. Skills-based hiring will continue to become more important.
Yes.
And skills are soft and they're hard. So what are some of those soft skills? Can you carry on a good conversation with someone? Can you make someone feel comfortable? And I think tech will help with that. But ultimately, you still have hiring managers who are not trained as to how to hire people and what to look for. You'll need an intermediary of some sort. It is a skill. You need to have somebody in that position who can be an advisor. You need somebody who in that position who can help with strategy. Where else could we find people who do this thing for a living? And so ultimately, I think the tools that we use to refine and to make the process better for candidates and for managers and to see more things there will continue to become better. And I love that. Ultimately, I think we still need to talk to people on both sides as a candidate and as a hiring manager and say, do we really think that this is the right environment for me as a candidate? And will I have the opportunity to grow and showcase and do the things I want to do? And ultimately, as a manager, do I think that this person is going to help me accelerate to get faster to my business outcomes I want? And that's not going to change. That's still business.
I agree. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you. I
There's
love
so
talking
many
to you.
nuggets in here. We will link your LinkedIn for
Great.
everybody that wants to follow you on your journey and the many things that I know you're going to continue to go out and do. And you're never going to get rid of me. So we will be
I don't
talking
want
again.
to. You're
But
counting on
thank
me.
you.
Thank you. I'm so proud and excited to be your first guest.
Well, you were perfect. So, all right. We'll talk to you again soon.
All right. Thanks, Lauren.
Thanks. Thank you for listening to Talent Show. Whether you're hiring or looking for a job or just here for a good time, we're so glad you're here. Don't forget to like, subscribe, tell a friend, tell an enemy, tell anybody that this is your go-to hiring podcast. Also, don't forget that when it comes to hiring, personality isn't extra, it's everything. All right, see you next time.